When the rest of the city shuts its doors and the neon signs hum like sleepwalkers, some people clock in and walk into a different kind of quiet, one that is thin and watchful, full of small sounds that suddenly feel like threats. Tonight, we bring you 4 first-hand accounts from people who worked the graveyard shift, whose routines turned into something none of them expected. Free food that felt like a joke, a detour that led to a scream in the trees, cameras that caught movement just out of frame, a runner on a treadmill, barefoot, bleeding. These are claimed first-person experiences from people who were alone when the night changed. Story 1. Thomas. The Whopper payments. He worked the graveyard window from 10 to 4. The shift was half routine and half survival. Keep the fryer steady, wipe the counter, listen for the crackle of the speaker. The restaurant's back room was a little warmer than the January air. The fluorescent lights hummed above him, and the drive-through lane was mostly empty after 2. Thomas kept his head down, counting chips and swapping sodas into the cooler. 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., he says. You get used to the silence, or you pretend you do. Aye, at first, it was just an oddity. A single car sliding into the lane near closing time, tinted windows and a slow pull-up. The kind of customer you barely notice in daylight, but whose silhouette at night feels like a shadow moved closer. The man would place an order, always the same thing, and when Thomas opened the slot for payment, the card would be handed through a glass that stayed almost entirely rolled up. Thomas slid the receipt back under the small hatch. The car would pull away without taking the bag. On the 3rd visit, a small, strange thing changed the jokes and the curiosity into a cold knot. Over the speaker, soft and unhurried, the stranger said, "I hope you've been enjoying those Whoppers, Mr. Hurley." Thomas felt the words hit like a hand on his shoulder. He remembers thinking, "I didn't sign my name on the register. I don't wear a name tag at night. How would he know?" Thomas started to notice the pattern. The same card number flagged on the register history, the same set of taillights disappearing into the dark. He kept the extra Whoppers in the walk-in, laughing with the crew until the owner cut the extra help, and it was just him and the manager with the keys. Soon the visits stopped looking like pranks. The orders began at odd times, always after 1 in the morning. The man's car would park just past the lot and sit with engine off, while Thomas finished his count. Then the note arrived on Thomas's doorstep. It was a plain piece of paper folded and tucked under the mat. In a handwriting that was deliberate and ugly, the message read, "I know what you did. You have 3 days." Underneath, a hand had written an amount and an address, $10,000, and a place on the opposite side of town for delivery. Thomas kept the paper in his pocket and felt the weight of it like a stone. He called the police. The officers came, polite and procedural, wrote the complaint, checked the register logs. They said they'd look into the card, but there was only so much a late-night call could do. The manager, when told what had happened, suggested Thomas stay with a friend. A week later, a rock smashed through his kitchen window at 3 in the morning. No note this time. Just glass, the rain on the tiles, and a scraped brick on the landing. The cops took pictures. Their faces were sympathetic but distant, a sort of quiet that said they couldn't promise anything soon. Thomas left the job the next month. He took day work, anything to avoid the drive-through lane after dark. He says he sleeps with all the lights on now, and when a car slows outside his house, he freezes, thinking it could be the same tires, the same tinted glass. He still doesn't know why he was targeted, if it was a prank that turned into a grudge, a scam that became personal, or something stranger. All he knows is the voice over the speaker that used his name, and the note that turned a joke into a deadline. If you're into these real late-night horror stories, tap like and subscribe. There's more ahead. Story 2. The rideshare driver and the turn-off. He thought it was another long fare, and another night where the city felt enormous and empty. Weekend surge had him taking a long-distance drop-off, the kind that pays decent and leaves you with time to think in the dark rows of highway lights. The passenger pulled a blanket over themselves, the interior light washed the dashboard, and the car hummed the same low note it always does on those long drives. On the way back, a couple waved from the side of the road, faces gaunt and urgent. Their clothes were damp with road mist. They flagged him to stop. They were asking for a favor. The driver ahead had warned them the bridge up ahead had collapsed, they said, and traffic was being rerouted. There was a detour, a narrow dirt path that cut through the trees, they insisted. "Take the turn," they said. "We tried it. It's a shortcut." He remembers the smell, cold leaves and gasoline, and the flicker of their hazard lights in the dark. Something in him wanted to help. But he had an instinct, that small animal part that keeps your feet moving when you hear a noise too close. It told him not to take the turn-off. He decided to keep driving and cross the bridge the old way. The bridge was intact. The highway was silent, apart from the occasional rumble of a truck. He told himself he did the safe thing. Curiosity, though, is like a slow itch. The next morning he drove back in daylight because he needed to see for himself what lane the couple had pointed out. The turn-off was real, a worn gap in the trees, and a narrow track that sank into the woods. He took the path on foot, boots thumping on soft, wet earth. A freshly painted dead-end sign leaned crooked at the bend, as if someone had hammered it there in a hurry. He paused. The trees closed like teeth. Then from somewhere deep between trunks and shadow, a scream burst out, so raw and so torn that it felt like a physical blow. It was a woman's scream, a sound that didn't make sense in daylight, that held no echo and yet seemed to come from everywhere at once. He says it was the kind of scream people are born remembering, sharp, animal, soaked with panic. He turned and ran without looking back, his heart punching under his ribs. When he reached the road, his hands were shaking. He called the local non-emergency line, but they told him there were no calls about a woman in the woods. There were no footprints that matched any obvious struggle near the path when he went back with friends. The underbrush closed over as if nothing had been there but wind. He never did learn who the couple were, or whether the scream was a trap, a test, or a victim's last cry. The not knowing sits in him like something unfinished. At night, when he drives routes that cut near tree lines, he swears he hears branches tapping his car like fingernails, a reminder that some turns are better not taken. Story 3. The Overnight Warehouse Guard. You can be trained for the predictable. Doors that stick, a faulty motion sensor, a lazy alarm that buzzes for no reason. But you aren't trained for the way silence can feel watched. He was the only one on duty through the night at an industrial complex. Large boxes, concrete floors that held the day's dust, long rows of fluorescent lights that hummed with the same tone as the security monitors. His job was simple on paper. Walk the perimeter, check doors, keep an eye on the feeds. The cameras were basic, cheap hardware stitched into a monitor wall, pixelating in bad weather and sharpening at close range. He liked the monotony. It gave him time to think and to forget. It started with motion alerts, pings in the corner of his screen that suggested something had tripped a beam at Dock 6. Each time he pulled the camera up, the motion was a half-second smear at the very edge of the frame, a shadow sliding against the darkness like something brushing the camera's blind spot. The motion repeated, always at 2 in the morning, always just where the camera's resolution faltered. He told himself it was a raccoon, a stray cat, the neighbor's kid. He logged it. He booked it into the incident file. On his third night, the inside of the building gave off a dragging noise, metal on concrete, slow and heavy like chains. The interior camera stuttered, then went to static for a breath, and when the picture returned, the angle had shifted, not loosened by wind, but cocked as if something had nudged it. He grabbed his flashlight and walked the aisles. Every step echoed. The beam fell on rows of pallets, a puddle of condensation, a tangle of shrink wrap. He called out, his voice small, "Hello, who's there?" The echo came back like an answer. The weirdest part was the footsteps. They matched his pattern but were always trailing, 2 rooms away, matching his cadence. When he stopped, they stopped. He would turn, flashlight stabbing, and there would be nothing but darkness settling back into corners. Once he followed a sound to Dock 7 and found a crushed soda can and a smear of dirt that might have been shoe print. When he checked the exterior cameras, the gates had been locked as they always were. The log showed no entries. He checked the cameras for tampering and found the feed grainy at the same moments the inside motion occurred. By the 4th night the banging started, heavy, deliberate knocks that came from a wall he could not access, as if someone was trying to get out or get in. He called dispatch. They sent a patrol car, which drove the perimeter slowly and checked the locks. Their conclusion was the only one available. Environment, wind, nothing found. Co-workers listened to his story over coffee in the morning and shrugged, the kind of shrug that says, "I'd be scared too, but I can't see it." He left the job months later, not fired but rattled. He tells the story now without bravado because he knows the ridiculousness of blaming cameras, yet he can't scrub the chills. Some nights when he hears the building hum near his apartment, he imagines a shadow at the edge of a monitor, patient as a predator. He describes the sound the way people do when they've been close to panic and survived it. Precise, small details that refuse to fit neatly into explanation. Story 4. The 24-hour gym runner. The gym was supposed to be safe. Keycard access, a front desk with a bored attendant, rows of machines lit in a blue-grey that made everything look clinical and alien. The young attendant liked the solitude. He could tidy equipment, check the cameras, sip coffee that was never hot, but somehow always necessary. It started at a routine check of the treadmill room. On camera, a man was running at 9 miles per hour for over 15 minutes, a steady, impossible rhythm. What unsettled the attendant wasn't the speed, but the details. The man was barefoot, wearing ragged clothes, and his expression was empty, as if he were staring through a wall. The treadmill display blinked beneath him. His feet beat the belt without the normal sound of sneakers. When the attendant approached, the smell hit him. Metal and something metallic that seemed wrong, an iron sour tang, and then he saw the soles of the man's feet, raw and streaked. He called out, "Hey, you okay?" The runner didn't stop. When the attendant got closer, the man breathed low and wet and whispered, "Are you there?" The words were soft, but the sentence landed hard in the quiet room. The attendant says the whisper wasn't a question of courtesy. It was almost an accusation, like someone testing for a witness. Blood trailed from under the runner's heels and splattered across the nearby mat. The sight was quick and terrible, reddish streaks on black rubber, droplets that shone like small alarms. The attendant reached for the emergency stop, but the runner's feet kept moving, one after another, trance-like. The man eventually stepped off and ran down the gym floor and vanished into the darkness beyond the treadmills. Later, footage showed him in the employee hallway without a keycard, pounding at the locked door with the palms of his hands until the metal banged. When the attendant opened the small window in the office door to speak, the man was close enough that the hairs on the attendant's arms rose. The man let out a sound that didn't belong to a human throat, a low, warbling scream that pitched and dropped like something huge trying to imitate a wail. The attendant reached for the latch and locked the door with shaking hands. When the police arrived, summoned by a call from the attendant's shaking voice, the hallway was empty. There were footprints that suggested someone had left in a hurry, bare prints in a smear of mud and blood, but no trace of the man himself. After that night, the attendant quit. The gym's management said they'd review the footage, tighten security, install new locks. He says none of that mattered. What lingered was the sight of a man running barefoot in a pool of blood, and the tiny human thing, a whisper that asked, "Are you there?" As though testing whether anyone could hear the edges of whatever he'd become. He sleeps with the TV on now, claiming the noise keeps the world at an even enough pitch to stop the memory from sharpening. Closing 4 people, 4 nights, 4 ordinary jobs that became the setting for small, contagious fears. Payments made but never picked up. A turn-off into trees and a scream. Cameras that lied about what they saw. A runner who looked like something else and then vanished. What ties these stories together isn't a single explanation. It's the way the night strips away the easy defenses, light, numbers, witnesses, and places a person alone with small clues that never quite add up. You can believe them however you like. You can say they're pranks, mistakes, glitches, or you can put yourself in the dark seat of a drive-through worker and hear a voice use your last name. You can be the one who hears a scream in the trees and runs the other way. You can be the guard watching a monitor when the image blinks and something shifts, or the attendant who hears a voice ask, "Are you there?" in a room that should be safe. Whatever you take from these accounts, the common thread is the same. The night narrows options. It makes small things loom and leaves you waiting for the rest of the explanation that never comes. These stories end in the same way many night shifts do, unfinished, uneasy, and with people who changed quietly because of what they saw. If any of this struck a chord, if you've had your own late-night scare or know someone who has, tell us in the comments. Your story matters here. Subscribe for more real night shift accounts and a playlist of similar testimonies. Be careful out there. When the city sleeps, small noises can become very loud.